Is Broken Lizard's new hilarious quasi-historical film Quasi worth the watch? Well, let's find out now. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watch or Pass. Today I'm here to talk to you about the new film by Broken Lizard, Quasi, which is coming to Hulu on April 20th, 2023. It is like kind of historical, but not really. It's got Quasimodo, it's based in France, but that's kind of it. Everything else is crazy, ridiculous, just what you would expect from Broken Lizard. My hot take is, look, I think you should watch it. It is not a phenomenal film, but if you like Broken Lizard, if you like what they do, then you will definitely enjoy this film. It has their trademark humor. It has some rude humor. It's got some funny situations. It's got some ridiculous characters. It is what you would expect from this crew. So if you are interested in that, then you will love this film. And it's coming to Hulu, so you can watch it pretty easily. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the film. A few things I liked, a few things I didn't like. Maybe touch on the ending just briefly. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I will let you know if I get into that section. Before that, I will keep it spoiler-free, so you can keep watching. I'll keep everything vague. But if I do get into the ending, I'll let you know, and there will be spoilers. So, in Quasi, you have the main character, the title character, Quasi, who used to be a bell ringer. He used to be, the Quasi that you know, but now he is working as a torturer. He is creating new torture techniques and testing them out in this, like, I don't know, torture facility, torture think tank, whatever you want to call it. And he and his best friend, I think it's Duchamps or Deschamps, they are both working here trying to create this new torture device called the rack, which I'm pretty sure was just Broken Lizard trying to work in rack into as many things as they could say. But you know, it's Broken Lizard, that is what they do. So Quasi is trying to perfect the rack, but during this time, he gets noticed by some high-level people. They're going to throw a wrench into his life and kind of change everything that he knows and loves in this strange, twisted plot. So things I liked about this movie. The first, look, the humor. It's Broken Lizard. If you like their humor, you will like this film. It is trademark Broken Lizard. It is very funny. There's a ton of silly situations, funny jokes, like weird situational comedy, and it's just a fun film. Like, I was smiling during most of it just because of how silly it was. It's kind of nice to just watch a ridiculous, funny film. When I talked to the Broken Lizard people, they said that they were trying to go for a Monty Python type feel, and it definitely has that. The second thing I loved, Broken Lizard characters. Look, this is a Broken Lizard film. You're going to have some crazy Broken Lizard characters. And the interesting thing here is that each of the actors in the Broken Lizard troupe played two characters. There's like a main character and then a side character, which some of them I didn't even recognize, like the side characters, until I saw the credits, which is kind of a testament to, you know, how fun their characters are and how ridiculous they can get, and just how much they are selling them. So this movie doesn't have a ton of people. Like, each of the Broken Lizard actors takes on two characters. That's like 10 people plus a few others. Because of that, it gives you a lot of just crazy situations and crazy people. And the last thing I loved is it's just kind of an insane story. Like I said, I was kind of smiling throughout this film. It is just a over the top ridiculous story. You know, you've got Quasimodo, you've got some very high level people that can interest in Quasimodo and then try to play him off of each other. And this is a story that has Quasi go from kind of the bottom all the way up through the echelons of power, interacting with people that he would never think of before. And it just builds and builds and builds into this silly, over the top, crazy story. So, all that being said, things I didn't love as much, and this is a very minor one. Like I said, I enjoyed the film. I was smiling throughout. The story is fairly linear. Like, even though the story does kind of become insane, it doesn't have that many twists and turns. Like, the situation gets crazier, but the situation itself, like as how it develops, is fairly straightforward. I was hoping for maybe a few more wrenches thrown in here and there. That could be for any number of reasons. It could be just because of the timing. It could be, you know, maybe, who knows, the runtime. Like, for whatever reason, it is a fairly linear story, even though it does get to be pretty insane towards the end. The progression doesn't throw that many twists and turns along the way. So I was kind of hoping for something a little bit more complex. I didn't get it, but you know what? I still enjoyed the film. So that is Quasi. It comes to Hulu on April 20th, 2023. Like I said, I think you should watch it. It's a pretty fun film. It's going to be definitely an enjoyable movie to watch on your April 20th. So check it out. I'm going to go very briefly into the ending. So if you don't know what happens in the film, I would turn it off now. So that being said, in Quasi, like I said, you've got Quasi and Deschamps. They are torturers. They're developing this new torture device called the rack, which takes up a lot of their time. But one day, randomly, the queen comes to visit the torture area, I guess. I think she's trying to, like, annoy her husband, the king. So she comes down here, sees all these people and takes an interest in Quasi. She sees him as like smart and also a good inventor, and he listens to her. She is used to being kind of like thrown aside by the king and all of the king's advisors. But when she's talking to Quasi, Quasi actually takes her advice, recognizes how smart she is, and like uses her advice to make the rack better. So that was kind of their initial meeting. Now, after this, there was a lottery that is happening where the winner of the lottery will get to meet the Pope. And Quasi's friend Deschamps is going crazy. He really wants to meet the Pope. He bought a ton of tickets. But right before the lottery, just to kind of like give his friend some hope, he gives Quasi one ticket. And wouldn't you know it, the ticket that is pulled is Quasi's. Quasi wins the lottery. Quasi gets to meet the Pope. Yay, everything's coming up Quasi. Well, maybe not so much. Before his meeting with the Pope, the king comes to see him. And the king basically tells him, for the good of France, you need to kill the Pope when you meet him. And Quasi's like, I don't want to kill the Pope. And the king's like, you're going to, or you and your best friend will die. So Quasi doesn't really have much of a good choice. But then when he goes to meet the Pope now kind of turns the tables and asks Quasi to kill the king. So the king asks Quasi to kill the Pope asks Quasi to kill the king. Quasi's stuck in between, and no matter which choice he makes, someone is going to die very close to him. So, and Quasi will also die. So, not a good situation for Quasi. But thankfully, because the queen is kind of understands what's going on and realizes the situation that they put Quasi in, she and Quasi come up with a plan. Quasi makes like a fake assassination attempt, pulls out 2 daggers, and Deschamps comes and kills Quasi in the fray, becoming a hero. You know, he becomes this like, he gets to kind of fulfill this hero role. Quasi is dead. He's dragged away, or is he? Well, he's dragged away to this like secluded cave that the queen set up for him. So basically, everyone thinks he's dead. So now he doesn't have to kill the Pope or the king, and he can live out his life in this cave. He's kind of lay low for a while, and probably he'll have to leave because it's not like he can just hide in plain sight. He is a very recognizable character. But unfortunately for Quasi, Deschamps is a little bit of a jealous person, and he comes to the cave to visit Quasi when the queen is also there. And he sees the queen and Quasi having a nice time. They're talking, they're chatting, they're being friendly. And Deschamps gets a little jealous. He wanted kind of the attention of people. He wanted the attention of the queen. So he goes and gets drunk and spills the beans, unfortunately, to his, I think his torture supervisor, someone who he shouldn't have, that then passes the information along to the king that Quasi is still alive. So unfortunately for Quasi, he gets captured, he gets tortured using his own devices. So hey, you know, maybe he's used to it. But before he is actually killed, the queen comes and saves him. She kills the torturer, saves Quasi, and when they're talking, they find out that they might have more in common than they originally thought. They actually end up being cousins. Quasi was abandoned when he was a kid. The queen had like a cousin who was abandoned. They figured it out pretty quickly, and then they hook up. So, you know, it's royalty, it's medieval France. This is probably fairly common. So unfortunately for Quasi, now that the king and the Pope both know he's alive, they both want him dead. And they are using Deschamps as a bait for him. So they capture Deschamps. Quasi goes to save him. The queen tries to save Quasi. It is a conundrum for all involved. But Quasi gets the crowd involved. The crowd is kind of sick of living under the king and the Pope. The crowd wants better life. Especially they want oysters. Oysters are like a big thing in this movie. I don't know why. Maybe Broken Lizard really likes oysters. Maybe oysters were really difficult to get in France. Maybe one of the Broken Lizard crew are allergic to oysters and they just wanted to make fun of them. Who knows? But oysters become this rallying cry for the crowd. Quasi fires them up. He says they want freedom and oysters. And during this time, during this like commotion, the king and the Pope end up killing each other. But you find out when they're dying that they actually used to know each other really well in college and they used to be good friends. And there was a misunderstanding over someone that they loved, and that is what caused their initial rift that then led to them wanting Quasi to kill each other. So now when they're both dying, they kind of come to terms and they die. Well, that leaves a hole in the royalty, but wouldn't you know it? The queen appoints her newly found cousin, Quasi, to be the king. And he becomes the king of the people. He makes everything better in France, and all's well that ends well. And so everything turns out fine. Everyone's happy except for the king and the Pope. But you know what? They're out of the picture anyways. There is a funny scene at the end of the movie where they're trying to bury someone and they eventually need to dig a bigger hole. It's related to earlier jokes. It's a pretty funny scene. And then also during the credits, there are some outtakes that you should definitely watch because it's really fun to see kind of like the Broken Lizard process and how they come up with these lines and some of the silly things that happen when they can't use them. So that is Quasi. It comes to Hulu on April 20th, 2023. Definitely check it out. It's fun. It's definitely worth a watch. And thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.